Hello. Hi, everyone. You having a great day? Yeah? I can't hear you. All right. Woo! All right, I'm going to start kicking this off a little bit with a little bit of a business. I want to acknowledge the National Science Foundation, first of all, for their support of our student and speaker travel. This has been a big thing for Nagelstep to be able to provide the funding for all of us who needed it to get here. And I know OSTEP had their own set of support, but for Nagelstep this was really big. And so thanks to NSF. I want a round of applause for NSF. Okay, can everybody get seated? And I want to introduce my good friend Lynn Conway. Lynn and I kind of came together at the last Out to Innovate, and we've sort of been comrade in arms, so to speak, on ideas. We've been meshing ideas, and I'm just so proud that she's here to give this first keynote. Lynn earned her degrees, an MS and a BS and an MSEE from Columbia University, and then she went to IBM Research during the mid-'60s. She made foundational contributions to computer architecture there, and that's when she decided to transition, and unfortunately IBM let her go because of that in the mid-'60s. And so she's a really greedy survivor and started all over again in stealth mode, and her career took off like a rocket again, and she started doing computer architecture again, this time at Memorex. And finally, she was recruited by Xerox Palo Alto Research Center in '73, where she did a lot of work, invented scalable digital design rules for silicon chip design, and became the innovative force behind a textbook on VSLI systems, and pioneered new teaching methods at MIT, and invented an ARPANET e-commerce infrastructure for rapid chip prototyping, which launched this whole worldwide revolution in microchip design. So she's been extremely important to the industry. And she quietly came out in 2000, built a trans advocacy website, translated into many languages so people could be part of that. And she's just been a wonderful beacon of hope for transgender people worldwide. So meanwhile, decades went by, and no one could explain how VSLI, the revolution, happened. They took it for granted that it was invented and ran with it, and Lynn's pivotal contributions weren't recognized. Remaining in the shadows, fearful of social ostracism, she felt unable to tell her story. And then in 2012, the IEEE Solid State Circuit Society invited Lynn to write her memoirs. And because times had changed, she decided to talk about her saga in VSLI Reminiscences in that IEEE Solid State journal. So Lynn has since received many numbers of awards for her work, the Wetherill Medal of Franklin Institute, the Pender Award of the Moore School, and the Computer Pioneer Award of the IEEE Computer Society. She's a fellow of IEEE and the Computer History Museum. She holds honorary degrees from Trinity College and Illinois Institute of Technology, and is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. And my favorite thing is she's an Engineer of the Year for Nagelstep several years back. So on that note, Lynn, come up and tell us your visions.
I really want to thank the organizers of this wonderful conference for inviting me to speak with you today. As perhaps the old-timer here, this really has great meaning. A kind of coming home into a welcoming community. It brings a kind of closure I just couldn't have dreamed of decades ago. I think perhaps you can imagine that. And as I think back to the last conference in 2012 in Ohio, I'm really amazed at the rapid progress our community is making on almost every front now as we travel through time. We've clearly entered a period of really historic techno-social change. And it's enabling ever more people to open the doors to personal freedom and to full participation in life by moving from covering in the shadows to stepping out and uncovering in the sunlight. And by doing that, LGBT people are at the very vanguard of this social renaissance we're beginning to see. Vision, teamwork, technology are enabling us and other former outsiders of all kinds to find our voices, our communities, and our rightful places in the world. In return, our accumulating experiences and impacts and increasing confidence are fueling ever more rapid social change. But where is this all headed? You know, while exciting, many people on the sidelines find the prospects scary, the prospects of ever-increasing social evolution rates. People don't want to be left behind as trains leave the station, but which trains to take and when to jump on them. After all, some of the early ones are going to run off the rails. So how do you plan? How do you position for careers, for loves, for life? How to keep up? And add on to that, I'm going to speculate with you that what we've seen so far is only just the beginning. A huge incoming wave of technosocial innovation is now just out there, just over the time horizon. It's going to soon sweep through and lift all our lives onto an even higher plane than we've experienced before. And you're all going to live to see, most of you will live to see lots of that come through. So how can we visualize what's going on? How can we prepare to surf that incoming wave? So that's kind of like that's what I'd like to explore today. But let's begin by reflecting back to my own awakening about this back in 2013 in Washington, D.C. It was a sultry June afternoon as my husband and I strolled towards the White House East entrance. And I reflected back to the time of my gender transition in 1968. Shamed as a social outcast, I'd lost my family, my friends, and all social support. I'd been fired by IBM and lost a promising computer research career. You know, back in a time when that could have meant ever so much. In many jurisdictions, I could have been arrested and charged as a sex offender, or worse yet, institutionalized and forced to undergo electroshock therapy, and worse. Things like prefrontal lobotomies were done back then in a mental hospital. Evading those fates, I completed my transition and began building a career in a secret new identity, starting at the bottom of the ladder as a contract programmer. But even then, you see, any outing could have led to media exposure. Think what that was like back then. Oh, jeez. And I would have become unemployable and out on the streets for good. So the resulting fear channeled my life into stealth mode. And I covered my past for over 30 years, always looking over my shoulder as if a foreign spy in my own country. But now this was June 13, 2013. And what a contrast it was. My husband Charlie and I, along with many other activists, advocates, and allies, were about to join the President's White House reception in celebration of LGBT Pride Month. The atmosphere was full of joy and hope for the future. And as we waited for the President, I reflected further. By then, I'd been out for 15 years, or so I thought. Out on the internet to inform colleagues about my past, out as an advocate for transgender people, as an advocate and activist against the psychiatric pathologization of gender variance. Now, it was one thing to hide in the back rooms of the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center decades ago, launching innovations as a hidden hand behind the VLSI microelectronics revolution in Silicon Valley, a revolution that's changed the world forever. However, back then, I didn't mind being almost invisible in my field, or that no one had a clue what I was really doing. Probably why I was able to get away with it. Much less who was doing it. See, back then, I was thrilled to even have a job. And I think many, many people in our community have lived lives like that. Contributing, living, loving, without anyone even knowing they were there. When we returned home, I began wondering about and reflecting on the very different ways that all the millions of LGBT people out there were experiencing the present time based on their ages and the decades when they'd become socialized. Now, kind of once attuned to that idea, I couldn't help but notice age differentials jumping out in the stories emerging in national media. Let me just give you a couple of examples in the summer of 2013. Here's one in The Advocate. Finding role models for my trans 5-year-old is a different, better world for young transgender kids by Gender Mom. I shudder to think what it would have been like 5 years ago had my child been born just a few years earlier. My local support group for parents of trans kids wouldn't yet exist. My child and I would have been on our own, groping around in the dark. Now there are conferences and even summer camps specifically devoted to kids like mine. And I'm watching the world change right before my eyes. So there is a mom and her 5-year-old in 2013 and how they see the world. And you can think about their life trajectories looking forward, both the child's and the mom's. And then around that time also, there was an article in the Daily News, Transgender teen lovebirds find happiness with each other. So now we have teenagers in 2013. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, the teens have been together for a little over a year. They met at a transgender support group while they were each transitioning to the opposite gender, and it wasn't long before they fell in love. After years of pain, the couple seems to have finally found happiness, both with themselves and with each other. Being transgender myself, I understood Aaron probably better than anybody else, how good he feels and how complete he feels, Katie said. And then, also around that time, there was the story on CNN, Anderson Cooper's interview with Kristin Beck. Former Navy SEAL comes out as transgender. And so here we have someone courageously coming out as transgender further along in life, someone who grew up in an earlier time when things were thought about rather differently. And there were some things in the article that I found very telling. Though she felt trapped in the wrong body since grade school, Beck didn't come out until after she left the military in 2011. You see how different this is than the 5-year-old of Gender Mom. Doing so earlier would have been too big a risk. Transgender men and women are banned from service. That's still a problem. There's a chance that if I took it, I might be dead today, she said. There's a lot of prejudice out there. There's been a lot of transgender people who were killed for prejudice, for hatred. Beck says she doesn't need people to love or even like her, but I don't want you to beat me up and kill me. You don't have to like me, I don't care, but please don't kill me. Now that is the experience and the sort of framing of the existence of an awful lot of transition people right now who grew up with that kind of social baggage and can't help but see that dark side out there. And look how different that is than kids growing up now in supportive families. And then I found another article, and I think this one really hit home. Because I have a lot of friends who are older. I'm 76 now. I know many people in their 80s, some in their 90s. And at that point in time, life starts to look a little different, you know, when you're counting down instead of counting up. So here is the story. New study, LGBT seniors struggle with suicide. It's by Matthew Bechko, Bay Area reporter. Isolated from family and largely living alone, LGBT seniors in San Francisco contemplate taking their own life at an alarming rate, a new study found. It's estimated there are anywhere from 18,000 to 20,000 LGBT seniors living in San Francisco, with the population increasing each year as the median age grows older. Executive Director Eve Myers said this survey finding, tragically, I think, is not surprising. For a lot of LGBT seniors, the living arrangements they've enjoyed had changed, and living independently often becomes an option not available to them, and they're often forced to live in extended care facilities of one kind or another. Now think about that. In such a setting, many LGBT seniors are pushed back into the closet, fearful of telling staff members or other residents about their sexual orientation or gender identity. You see, because now you're pushed back in among people who grew up long ago in those earlier generations, and you're forced back into the darkness. You see? So although we all seem to be living in the present, we're not all living in the present. Each cohort lives kind of in a different time, the time when they were socialized, unless they stay on the front of the wave and kind of keep up with things. So because of all that, it greatly exacerbates LGBT seniors' risk for depression. She added, causing them to consider suicide. So now, see, this is a problem. And what can we do about that problem? How can we change their past into their present? Let's begin visualizing the vast technocultural transformation now taking place all around us as a result of mass social migrations from mass media to social media. As a result of this, many top-down, over-controlling, authoritarian institutions are actually sinking into a rising sea of agile, participatory, egalitarian, supportive, entrepreneurial, competitively cooperating meritocracies. And we can learn a lot about all that by observing the intergenerational and international cross-currents as this trend accelerates. So let's just look in the media again, just for some examples that kind of stand out because of those kind of reasons. There was an article last April by Lisa Stolberg, Associate Professor of Sociology of Education at NYU Steinhardt, that I really found compelling. And she's talking about the perils and possibilities of transgender visibility, being simultaneously fraught with danger, incredibly exciting, and potentially radical. She talks about Jared Leto's Oscar for his role in Dallas Buyers Club. I think we're all familiar with that controversy. It led to a lot of complex discussions. Many lauded his role for increasing trans inclusion in mainstream media, but others found the role dehumanizing, recklessly stereotypical, and a gross misrepresentation of trans women's lives. Meanwhile, at the same time, a lot of high-profile trans women activists are suddenly bringing widestream media attention to their experiences in their politics. Transgender actress Laverne Cox, Orange is the New Black, a really authentic vocal activist for trans justice. And Janet Mock, a transgender writer-activist, wrote a New York Times best-selling autobiography, Redefining Realness. And supermodel Gina Rosero had just come out as trans in her 2014 TED Talk. But you see, visibility alone, it does not ensure progressive social change, but visibility has the power to eviscerate loneliness and to build community, and the power to irrevocably change hearts and minds. Now, a lot of that visibility was arising because of social media, projecting out through mass media. Without that social media, would any of that have been happening? I'm not so sure. Now, for trans visibility in particular, there's really something more. The trans visibility demonstrates how creative change can come from those who've been severely culturally and politically marginalized. And while pop culture can dangerously affirm old stereotypes that dehumanize and marginalize, it can also make us confront our ignorance, confront each other, ask questions we didn't even know existed, and feel with every fiber of our being. But importantly, as we know, the trans visibility is being enormously enabled by our emerging and evolving social connective media. Now, around the same time, we had this, and consider this, technology's man problem. This was in the New York Times last April. You probably heard of this. Alyssa Shavinsky can pinpoint the moment when she felt she no longer belonged. While at a friend's house on September 8, 2013, watching the live stream of the TechCrunch Disrupt Hackathon, two young Australian men stood behind the podium to give their presentation. Tits Stare is an app where you can take photos of yourself staring at tits, as one began. As photographs of women's chests on a cell phone flashed on the screen behind him, and then after some banter, the other concluded, "This is the breast hack ever." The crowd, overwhelmingly young, white, hoodie-wearing men, guffawed. Something in Ms. Shavinsky's mind clicked. If there ever was proof the tech industry needed more women, she thought this was it. Shavinsky wasn't the only one disgusted by the presentation. Twitter lit up with outrage. Ah, Twitter. Surprising how many people still don't know about Twitter in the authoritarian centers of the world. So Alyssa joined in and she wrote a blog post manifesto. "I thought we didn't need more women in tech. I was wrong." And that really lit up the Bay Area especially. Let me tell you. I mean, this was just, I think a lot of the guys in tech are beginning to get ashamed of a lot of the other guys in tech. It's like, what the heck is going on? Well, anyway, even so, today, even as so many barriers have fallen, computer engineering, the most innovative sector of the economy, remains behind. A culprit many people in the field say is a sexist, alpha male culture that can make women and other people who don't fit the mold unwelcome, demeaned, and even endangered. So again, social media provided a voice for those who were demeaned to expose the demeanors. A powerful voice. But then consider the following. From Silicon Valley to White House, new U.S. tech chief makes change. Megan Smith just moved from a top job in Google in Silicon Valley, where she was vice president of Google X. Let me tell you, Google X is something else. She moved to the White House, where she's now the country's chief technology officer. The topic of women in tech is on many minds lately, such as Tits Stare. And in every other industry once dominated by men, finance, law, medicine, and so forth, has come closer to parity. Tech, meanwhile, seems to be going backwards. I call it death by 1,000 cuts, Smith says. When you look at it in the aggregate, it really is a lot of unconscious bias. Smith, a lesbian who was CEO at Planet Out, managed to get by people's biases and brought her passion in climbing to lead Google X, the division of Google that rolled out self-driving cars, and then going on to become US CTO. Smith is a gay woman scientist, which could make her a potential outsider on a few levels. Instead, She's as inside a tech leader as can be, even bounding around the White House with ease. So again, you see, coming up through a kind of corporate environment and corporate environments where adventure and exploration, team accomplishment is rewarded, and people love to go on those adventures. She was prepared for this. And then her story was amplified by social media. And if you start to think about it, Megan's story gives lie to the pranks of the nerds. And then this comes along. I really love this. This is just too much. November 3rd on the AP, November 3rd, 2014. Russia removes statue after Apple CEO comes out. A 6-foot statue of an iPhone on a St. Petersburg University campus has been taken down in response to last week's announcement by the CEO of Apple that he is gay. In a statement, authorities described Tim Cook's revelation a public call to sodomy. And they said they were taking down the statue because it violated Russia's law protecting minors from homosexual propaganda. Apple declined to comment on the removal of the statue, which featured former CEO Steve Jobs. Now just think about the intergenerational and international cross-currents of messages this sends to generations of young people around the world, not just in Russia, but around the world, about Russia. You see, meanwhile, the social age has only just begun. I don't think Putin's noticed. Imagine what will happen as the tide of techno-socio innovation really comes in. Reminds me of what happened to the Russians when the microelectronics revolution came in. That's another old story. So now I'd like to shift gears and start looking ahead. And think about what is potentially happening. What's out there just over the horizon? Why do people like me and a bunch of other people start thinking, oh boy, this looks big, okay? Kind of earthquake predictors. We're not sure we're doing science, but we have a feeling this is coming. Those of us working in microsystems have seen bits and pieces of it coming for many years now. In an ever-widening array of incredible innovations in microelectronics, MEMS, nanotechnology, micromachining, 3D printing, and additive manufacturing, and on and on. However, the micro results have been deeply embedded within final products, such as smartphones, autos, aircraft, and other macro-scale systems. But how many people have a clue what's in their smartphone? I mean, out there in the general public. It's mind-boggling. So the underlying explosion of micro-world innovations has remained out of sight. And it's underappreciated by the public, underexploited by entrepreneurs, but that's all about to change. As smartphones, watches, and glasses become Lego-like, partially customizable assemblages that can be reconfigured via modular micro-hardware apps. You know about software apps? Well, micro-hardware apps are coming that can be stuck in these things to meet individual and group requirements, adapt them, make them different for different people in different places. The wide social media visibility of these hardware apps in people's smartphones and watches and glasses and on, is going to lead to the embedding of very low-cost, interconnected microsystems to animate wearable technology, medical devices, personalized technology, automobiles, mobility technology, homes, robots, drones, environmental infrastructure, and beyond. So this is beyond the Internet of Things. This is more like creating a kind of nervous system for all of humanity to be connected and interact together. Now, it's going to do something else, because you see that those embeddings of the microsystems into things to do stuff is going to trigger innovations back within micro-making and manufacturing technology itself. That'll close the loop and provide intellectual gain in the technosocial exploration of the micro world. Now, okay, this all sounds great, but where are all the innovators going to come from? I mean, we're talking worlds to be created. Fortunately, a sea change is sweeping through our universities. Leading engineering and business schools are increasingly exploring experiential learning, flipped courses, MOOCs, SPOCs, and blended learning, emphasizing entrepreneurial, multidisciplinary, user-centered problem solving and exploratory team projects. And many incoming students have gone to Lego camps, done 3D scanning and open source 3D printing, used Raspberry Pis and Arduino to make and do stuff. They worked in fab labs, participated in robot competitions, and in the maker movement, motivating increasing numbers of students towards real-world, user-engaged team problem solving to create products that truly meet these human needs. But what tools will all those innovators use to do their stuff? Well, we're also witnessing a revolution in design tools for user-engaged, three-dimensional visualization, design, modeling, simulation, and prototyping. Tools that can bring in artisans, designers, creative people of all kinds to design, model, simulate, prototype just in time to support participatory user designer fabricator explorations in how to embed microsystem functionality in and animate all sorts of new macro scale products in our clothing, our homes, offices, automobiles, and structures. As a result, we're going to see a refactoring, reshoring, dispersal, and market democratization of manufacturing, leading to the rise of many novel forms of specialized component integration and subassembly shops and make places, with user community involvements, creative quick turnaround partial customizations, order to delivery times becoming vital market success factors. Okay, but now, saying, wait a minute, that's all good, but that can't happen because how on earth could companies connect and thrive within this massive, rapidly evolving, collaborative, competitive industrial ecosystem? There's an answer. The hybridization of design automation and social media technology will take us way beyond design tools into multi-technology exploration infrastructure for user engagement, interactive market development, user-driven technology evolution, collaborative learning, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, meta-level team design support, and even IP marketing and validation, plus agile project methods and more, so as to enable all participants to dramatically scale up their connectivity and impact. As this incoming wave of innovators, artists, designers, investors, social infrastructure, design tools, manufacturing facilities, products, and markets crests, it's going to trigger pretty disruptive change. And I think it will do so by moving societies towards increasingly diverse, egalitarian, inclusive, and thriving futures. As ever more people migrate from being isolated consumers of mass-produced goods and mass entertainment towards being entrepreneurial and participatory customizers of their own habitats and their own lives. I think, importantly, in this process, we're going to see art being added to STEM. And this comes from a notion at the Rhode Island School of Design about STEM becoming STEAM, putting the A in STEM. And if you think about it, what if artists and artisans, musicians, performers, writers, and filmmakers could join in with scientists and engineers and makers on the teams as they go on this grand exploration of what is possible to do. So Rhode Island School of Design, STEM becomes STEAM. Steam power. Think about it. Okay, so maybe that's all going to happen. I think, it'll take 20 years from now, things are going to be really different. And it's happening, it's just starting, but oh boy, Okay, but now how can we catch such incoming waves and have fun learning and teaming up and going exploring and leading in the social age? Well, it's not going to be hard if you're open to it and if you want to be a player. The emerging participatory communities will welcome you in. All you have to do is be curious, be excited about learning new things, be unafraid to be a beginner at new things, and be eager to join new teams. Learn the ropes and contribute however you can. Because you see, there are going to be ever so many teams you can join over your life. Think of the adventures you're going to have. Not just one career, not just a number of hobbies and sports, but it will almost be like living multiple lives, each of which has multiple adventures with different kinds of people. Well, there are a lot of emerging guidebooks and media that are holding clues. So people are already starting to write about how not just to survive, but to thrive as all this starts to happen. A couple I've just recently read, just things that are on my mind right now. One I really thought a lot about and pondered was Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. Why do we do what we do in life and business? Well, this is really a cool book. Provides powerful guidance on how to edit old habits and create new ones, how to stop old habits that are just taking you around in circles and jump onto new habits that will keep you on the front of the wave. That's going to be important. So you can't do new things if you're all busied out doing old things. You only just have time and what you do with time. Learn how to edit and create habits. And then there was one by Julian Stodd, The Social Leadership Handbook. This little book is pretty amazing. It provides an evolving, shareable, visual social framework based on engagement, narrative, and technology, providing a way to help see the connections among questioning, learning, doing, fixing, refining, editing, narrating, curation, storytelling, sharing, building community, collaboration, co-creation, social reputation, and social capital. And I think as this social age unfolds and many of the authoritarian top-down institutions of the past begin to fade, ever more of us will focus our attention on building social reputations as learners, sharers, helpers, contributors, innovators, leaders, and explorers, rather than merely individually seeking money, material possessions, formal positions, and the appearances and trappings of power. By so doing, we'll steadily increase our social agility and our opportunities for teaming up with cool people, going on explorations, enjoying exciting adventures, and leaving tracks behind. Well, let's just reflect a little bit on all that. Connecting the dots, I think it really is clear that we're entering some new renaissance. Call it what you will. It's the big one. And partly it's because this micro gold rush has begun. And it's exponentiating due to the gain in the exploration ecosystems in the emerging Silicon Valleys and Maker Valleys all around the world. And it will really get a head up of steam as the artisans and artists around the world join in the artist valleys around the world. As they simultaneously exploit and expand the technosocial infrastructure of this emerging age. Furthermore, this revolution in human enterprise is technologically, economically, politically, and socially inevitable because the long-term success of humanity depends upon sustainably providing ever more infrastructural functionality and life empowerment per person while consuming ever less energy and ever less material resources per person. See, it's a game of how we're going to do ever more with ever less energy and material resources. And that's quite a challenge. It doesn't mean limiting ourselves. It means really in smart and artistic and creative and scientific and engineering ways, making a very different kind of future where we're not necessarily surrounded by big structures, you see? Where we've learned how to live freer with less, live more fully with less, live more connectedly with less. To conclude and reflect back again, one thing to remember, if you want to change the future, imagine it and then start living as if you're already there. And this is harder, but have no fear. Embrace and enjoy the escalating rate of technosocial change, for it brings and will bring ever more a truly wonderful side effect. And here's the thing, the side effects are everything. It's going to enable us to live far further into the unfolding future than we ever could have imagined. So don't be frightened by the fact that you're going to get to, in effect, live longer, see more of it unfold. I mean, this is just amazing. And it's going to be quite an adventure. Thank you.